So, been percolating on a passage again. Well, actually, lots of them, but I'm going to try and just pick one core concept here. I'll probably reference a lot of them, and I'll try and remember to post it in the description so that people can find them, because I'm not really great at listing where stuff is because it's just kind of stored up here. I don't really have it cataloged neatly. So anyway, but the passage I'm primarily coming from is in 2 Corinthians, I think, chapter 3, right, where it's talking about um, kind of how we have a different, um, we should have a boldness to go before God because, and it's comparing it to Moses. And so what it's saying is that Moses, it's comparing how Moses, because in the law, which led, where it's giving the idea that the law led to death for all, like it was not the hope and the revelation that we get from Christ, right? That to life and hope and everything, right? But even in that law, that Moses would go before the Lord, and the glory of the Lord that would just so transform his countenance, people couldn't even look at him directly, and that Moses would then have to put on a veil to it's not just like cover up the glory of the Lord, but the fading of it, right? Because he knew that it was going to fade. Not even going to dig into why he would be covering up the fading, right? But like just the concept that he was putting on the veil because he knew the nature of things was he would go and be in the presence of the Lord, his countenance would be changed, and then he would come back, and then it would fade, right? And it's saying that we should be able to have a boldness and a confidence because we are not under the old covenant. We are not, that basically that leads to death, that brings the conviction of sin, all that. We have the hope of, from Christ, right? Like the forgiveness of sins, the ever increasing spirit, right? Like that we should be continually being transformed. But it's so that's basically what he's saying. So Moses having to go, okay, planning ahead, knowing it's going to fade, he puts on the veil. We should not have to worry about the veil of our, which to me, I think of behavior and all that. That's kind of our veil, our doing what's right, and like as far as like externally, not necessarily internally, but like the making sure that we line up externally with what a Christian's supposed to look like, all that kind of stuff, right? We should not have to worry so much about the veil because we have continual access. The Holy Spirit is with us, and so we should be continually being changed, right? And the veil actually gets in the way, honestly, when we're so consumed by our behavior and how things should look as a Christian, and making sure we're doing it right, and everybody can, because then it's just a veil. We can't really see what's behind the veil. We can't really see if anybody's being transformed. We can't see, right? So anyway, that's a whole other side note. My ping pong ball gets going, so, but what I want to focus on is rather the beholding itself, right? Transformed by beholding, because it wasn't an active thing like I'm going in with the idea of transforming and I'm putting in effort and I'm going to really, study and focus and all that, and then and so that I can get transformation. That's not what it was. It was just the act of beholding was transformative, right? That Moses would be in the presence of the Lord, seeing the Lord, and it would just transform him. And just like I don't know, it makes me think of that passage where the eye is the lamp of the body, right? And if your eye is full of light, then the whole body will be filled with light. But if the light that's in you is darkness, how great will that darkness be, right? Like if the things that we're beholding that light our lives, that light us internally, that make us feel good, that make us, that give us the fuel for our day, if those things are not of God, which basically if it does not proceed from faith is sin, right? Like if those things are what we're lighting our body with, then that's how great is the darkness, right? But if we are beholding the Lord and we're taking that time and meditating on it, because that we will be passively like transformed, like we're not necessarily taking an active thing, it just happens, right? And it's just part of, like, I believe when I'm reading throughout the Bible that it is just wired into who we are. We are transformed by beholding, period. The thing that we have some say in is what are we beholding, right? Because it will transform us. And so that's where for me, because I'm thinking of the passage also that says we're talking about idols, right? And it's saying, it's somewhere in the Psalms, it's talking about these idols, these things they have no mouth, they have mouths but don't speak, eyes but don't see, ears but don't hear, right? Which regardless of it being an idol or money or the news or I don't know, whatever mammon we have, right? That we are, it can't actually by itself, it's not able to really change. But then specifically, Evan, I'll bring it back to where I was going, ping pong ball, um, is that it's saying they have all these things, but they can't do anything. And those who make them and those who trust in them will become like them. They will have, like they basically saying, in this instance, they're not going to be able to do the thing, right? They're going to be like these idols, right? And I think so much like, because I'm not specifically talking about just those specific idols, but just that concept of what are we beholding, because it's gonna impact us, right? Because we are using it to light our body. We're basking in it, right? And because sometimes for me, like there's times and there's seasons where the Word of God and like prayer and spending time with God is kind of more like a responsibility. Like I just do it, which I'm not saying that's bad, right? Like, because we have to have some structure or else it's just, it goes the other way too easily, right? We have to have it like as an anchoring thing. But like when I'm taking the time to really just, without trying to get something specific, right? Because I can do that thing where I'm trying to read the Word because I want to receive a certain message. I want the Lord to tell me something that I want to hear or that I feel like I need to hear or whatever. And but then there's times where it's like, instead of, I like the way Oswald Chambers just described it on one thing where he said, how did he say it? When we have time, basically, we oftentimes, what we do is when we're suffering or whatever, we seek the Lord for his blessings, for his relief, right? But like once we get past that level of maturity where we can just seek the Lord for himself. Like, who are you? Like really meditating on really being open, because it's hard to do that when we have something we're trying to prove or trying to get to or we're trying to get an applicable message from the Lord, right? Which I think is kind of a deformation of our faith, maybe based on like the way that we do church, not just church, but like school, everything. It's always like, here's the takeaways. It's never about like the process of, not never, but like, it's not really necessarily about the process of learning and just soaking, right? Like, whereas a lot of ancient cultures, like when they did with, and I mean, including like the Jews and stuff, there's a lot of like, having the question not answered is actually good because it keeps you meditating on it, thinking about it, wondering about it, right? And one of the passages that made me really start to think about this and realize this is the passages, there's a lot of them, but I know a lot of them are in Psalm 119, but where David is talking about the law and he is just saying like, oh, how I love your law. Like I meditated on it day and night and like it makes me wiser than all of my foes, all these things. Like he's just like, so like comes back, keeps talking about everything comes back to your law, your law. And I was like, okay, yeah, I've always read that and been like, yeah, the Bible is great for that kind of thing. And then it just clicked that I was like, wait a minute, David didn't have the Bible. Like he had like the Torah, maybe. Like he had like Genesis through what, probably not even up to Judges, even like maybe some historical writings there, but like it was like the Moses stories, like, and maybe and some of the like Genesis, like it's not what we would have today at all, right? And there's so much in there that is like, there's stories and things that it's a lot of unpacking. Like you can't just read it with like expecting a takeaway. Like there's so much stuff in these books that you're like, what? Like what even does that mean? And that's the beauty of it, is because we don't know it, I think it puts us in a posture of beholding more, just because it's mysterious and we don't understand. And sometimes we can package things so much that we feel like we understand and that we stop beholding because we think we already have gotten the takeaway. I can read passages, especially ones that are highly referenced, and just think I know what it means because I've heard it so many times in church, or it's in the lyrics of a song, or it's even just one like Jeremiah 29:11 that people quote all the time, which I always thought was kind of interesting that they only quote that one and they don't quote the part after it, which I think is kind of important. But I'll leave that for you to investigate. But anyway, I just think that there's something about that really beholding in a way that, because it's not just looking at, it's like, because if you think of the other things that we behold that transform us, the advertisements, like movies and things, the ideas of like, well, I'm not even gonna go deep into like the ideas of gender and all that kind of stuff that's out there right now, all the political stances, the Christian nationalism, all these things that we behold, they do transform us. They transform us a lot. And when you're a person who is kind of like, can't, like for me, I'm hypersensitive and I have post-traumatic stress, so I don't behold a whole lot of pop culture, modern stuff because I can't handle it. It's too much for me. And then when I'm around people who have been beholding it, it's very obvious to me because there's some when you're transformed by something, sometimes it's like it is just really obvious. Like, well, and I mean, even for me, like personally, like let's say there are people that I have been hanging around at certain times in my life, or um, and I can, people around me could just tell, like, you've been around so and so, haven't you? Because I'll start talking in a different way and maybe using expressions they use. Like, I'm not doing it intentionally. It just kind of, I have been transformed a little bit by beholding them, right? Like, there are just things that we do, we don't mean to, and it's not, but it's like being aware of what we're beholding. And in the way that we're beholding the Lord, sometimes we're not really, mm, we're not exactly beholding in the same way because we're um, the the phrase that comes to mind is like, um, I can't hear you over the sound of what I think you're gonna say. You know, like we get so completely used to hearing things, or even reading the Bible. Like, I'm not even just saying like church. Like, sometimes it's just we read the Bible so much and we think we know what it's going to say. We can't hear when the Lord's speaking something new, you know? And, or sometimes for me, I've had passages where I'm afraid to go. Like, I always, I always laugh, like there's sometimes where I'm like, because I just read through the New Testament and the Old Testament, kind of like looping over and over and over, right? And sometimes when I get to Hebrews, I'm like, oh no, like this one has scary stuff in it. So like, you know, there's some passages that I read a little different because I'm like afraid of it. So it makes it harder for me to behold it more clearly because there's something in it I'm afraid of, or like, I hope it's not saying that, you know? And so it's like a different attitude because if I am trying to get something or trying to avoid something, or, you know, like I can't really just behold and let it transform me because I'm holding something back, or I'm trying to get something out of it and it doesn't have the same transformative effect. Whereas if I'm like around a person, right, that I'm enjoying and I'm, you know, and I'm gonna maybe start to reflect them and I'm not even thinking about it, right? And it's maybe the passage, or not passage, the metaphor I've heard of like bearing the fruit of the spirit is like a tree doesn't try to bear fruit, right? It just soaks in the nourishment of the soil and the water and the sunlight, and then the fruit happens. And that's, you know, and I think that sometimes it's that kind of beholding we need to make sure that we're having that time with the Lord, you know, not pressuring a change, not going, oh, I need to get this better, or I need to, you know, I don't know, renew my mind and blah, blah, blah. Those are things that happen naturally. But we have because we do the veil, right, where we go, okay, I need to do the Christian things, which, like I said, I'm not saying chaos, but there's like structure is one thing to help us, you know, make sure that we're not forgetting things, right? Like we're not like taking it for granted and never spending that time with the Lord, but like, um, but not like, but sometimes we can get really where we start to be more over focused on our behavior, right? So if I'm reading so that's the other part of it, is if I'm reading the Bible and I'm reading things and I'm praying and I'm seeking the Lord and the Lord is showing me things about myself, it's also a slippery slope because I can just start beholding myself and my flaws. I can start beholding my problems and they will transform me. And I will get all kinds of weird transformations that are not what I'm supposed to be getting in that time. Because I like, and I think a long time ago I did one about like praying to my problems. Sometimes I feel like I would start to pray to the Lord and then it turns into a prayer to my problems because that's all I'm thinking about. That's all it's is like all the things like, okay, well, and then this and then, you know, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, who am I beholding here? And sometimes it is, we can become like so focused on our own sanctification, which by the way, we can't really do anything about. Sanctification is a divine work. And it's not about effort at all. Like the more effort we put forth, sometimes it means the less change there's actually been under the surface because we're really trying to keep that veil in place, not just for I think sometimes we keep a veil in place of our behavior, not for other people, but even for ourselves, so that we don't know, you know, because we don't want to see like, am I really like, I want to feel like I'm doing a good job. I want to feel like I'm getting closer to what I'm supposed to be, you know? And so anyway, I just think that that this is just an important thing to like contemplate, like what am I beholding, and catching myself, like inviting the Holy Spirit, like let me know, like reveal to me, like speak that word, do something to let me know when I'm falling into a moment of beholding something that is transforming me, especially if it's something I shouldn't be beholding in that way, that I'm allowing it to transform me. Because I think there's sometimes we can behold things when we know it has the power to transform us and we're being mindful of it and we're, you know, on guard against it. Maybe it's not as big of a deal, but like when we don't even know it's changing us or transforming us. But sometimes we can see on the outside, like for me, like when I've been doing some beholding of my medical issues or the systems or whatever, like I can do some serious beholding of that, because like when things feel like they're like it's hard for me to see like a solution, it becomes like a puzzle kind of thing that I keep like trying to trace back, and then before I know it, it can really, I will see on the other side of it that there's been some transformation that's no bueno in me, right? Like I'm getting stuck in the thought loops and I'm getting more and more jaded, and I can go, okay, I've been beholding something that's not quite right. And that, but then it's not always really clear to me when I start doing it, like, and I just see the aftermath and I'm like, oh, okay, let me trace this back. What happened? Because I was having peace and I was having faith, and suddenly I'm having fear, and I'm having like my problems seem a whole lot bigger, and the Lord seems a whole lot smaller. And so like taking those times, and I always love like the passages, and I think there's some of the older the songs too where they talk about magnifying the Lord, right? I think that that's part of it too, like because the Lord, we cannot see the Lord the way that we should. Like if we could see the Lord as he really is, like all of our problems would be done. Like we would know, we would understand how small our struggles are. We would see how foolish it is for us to be so concerned about certain things because we have this earthly perspective, and like, but like but when we take that time in our time of beholding to magnify him, and for me, I'm right now, and I'm not saying this is for everybody, but like right now, the Old Testament, it really is magnifying the Lord for me. Like I'm able to see a lot more of like how massive and like powerful, and like, I mean, just even in the books of the kings, right? Like even kings who are like not really aligning with him well, like that are doing wrong things and pulling the wrong way, right? But he's still like, was it the Assyrians? I can't remember if it was the Assyrians, or I feel like it was the Assyrians, but they're like laying siege and like to I can't remember if it was Judah or Israel right now. Like I'm not good with specifics, like data. I forget things easy, but the concept was like they're getting all panicky about it and everything, and then the Lord just like speaks to them, says, "Don't worry, I got this," basically, and then in a single night, that spirit of the Lord, the same, it's described the same way that described the one in Egypt, right? Just goes out, and I can't remember if it's like how many thousands of their troops, they just die in their sleep, and like everybody else runs away. Like they're like, whoa, okay, we don't mess with this God. I don't know who their God is, but they always like confused when God does something. They're always like, I don't know about the God of that valley. Like, who's that God, right? Like, but like it reminds me like all of these things that I'm trying to solve, or I'm beholding and letting transform me and make me jaded and sad and scared and overwhelmed, like to be reminded, like I need to take more time beholding the Lord, and like without just trying to get something, but just trying to see him. Who is he? Like not being scared to see it either, because sometimes I'm a little afraid to like see all of it, because there's some things that I read that I go, oh, I don't know, that's a little scary. But like being able to behold him and see that greatness, and make it like get that, because I guess even with the Old Testament for me too, it's like looking back over all that time helps me feel like helps me feel a little smaller in the grand scheme of things, which also like brings my problems a little bit down to size too, like, and because I think so much about like also the passage about Peter, right, where he steps out of the boat, right, and he's like he's all gung-ho, he's like, tell me to come out into the water to you, and Jesus says come, and he comes out, and he's like, and then whenever we start moving forward, whenever we start having faith, it's like those waves. Like if he didn't look at the waves, he would have been able to keep going. But he started to see the waves, and then the logic and the reason and the critical thinking and all the stuff, and then he starts to sink. And it's like getting that perspective where I'm not seeing the waves, I'm just seeing the Lord. And so that beholding can transform me to that place that I really want to be, where it is just like a place where when something happens, my instinct, my first thought is faith, trust in the Lord. And so anyways, I think I've said more than enough, so I'll stop here.